Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into my channel. This is Brittany from By Brittany Goldwyn, a blog about DIY houseplants and gardening. And today I have another houseplant care video for you for the gorgeous Cebu Blue Pothos. So I'll give you a look at this guy right here. I have been growing this one for quite a while. It is one of my current favorites. I'm a real sucker for any sort of trailing plant. And this one just really takes the cake, as you can see. I've trimmed this one so many times and it's still huge, and I'm really excited to tell you about caring for this beauty today. So where does the name for this plant come from? You can see, compared to some of the other more common types of pothos you may be familiar with, this one is green, but it has a little bit of like a bluish turquoise undertone. And I found I've really been able to capture this well in some pictures that I'll throw up here on the screen. But you can see that the leaves just have a really nice hue to them. And in certain lights, they kind of have like a silverish sheen, which I really love because I love silver plants. So you can find this plant in a lot of different places. I actually got this one when it was about 1/3 this size at like a Home Depot or a Lowe's or something. One of my friends actually picked it up for me. I'm seeing these all over nurseries now though, so you'll surely be able to find one if you're looking for one. So while pothos plants in general are known to be lower light plants, I would not recommend a lower light situation for this plant. Bright indirect light is best for this. Too much direct sun will burn the leaves. If you have this one outside for the spring and summer, make sure to put it in the shade or under a covered patio. That's why I had this one the first summer I had it, and it did really great outside. I've kept it inside for the last few years after that summer outside. And right now I kind of have it in like medium light levels, which probably isn't enough, which I'll show you a little bit when I talk about leggy growth on the ends of this plant. Bright indirect is best, but I'm still kind of figuring out where I want to put everything, especially as we head into winter and I have more plants inside, and now that I have this sunroom, I'm just still figuring everything out. So, you know, sometimes you have to sacrifice a little bit of light for plants, but bright indirect light is best for this one. You can use any sort of well-draining houseplant soil. It is very patient, as long as it's got like some perlite in it to help encourage good drainage, and some coco coir, which is a really great and more sustainable alternative to peat moss. That helps with lightweight moisture retention, which basically gives this plant the best of both worlds. It retains water, but not too much water, and it drains everything that it doesn't need out the pot's drainage holes in the bottom. As far as watering goes, I generally water this one once a week in the spring and summer, and once every 2 or so weeks in the fall and winter. Overwatering this plant will kill it. If the soil is very wet and you notice leaves are like limp and some of them are kind of turning yellowish, that's probably a sign that you're overwatering the plant. I like to let the top several inches of soil dry out before watering, so that really depends heavily on the temperature you have the plant in, the lighting conditions, the humidity, all sorts of different things. And that's also why I water the plant more in the spring and summer and less in the fall and winter. When I do water this plant, I like to do so in the sink or shower so I can clean up all the foliage. I like lift it up. I swear, like in my head, I think this is like Rapunzel plant. I lift it up and then I make sure to like spray all underneath so I can clean as much of the foliage off as possible, because this would just be impossible to do by hand. And as you can see, I'm kind of like manhandling this. I mean, this plant is so resilient. You do not have to walk on eggshells around it, and it will still grow really beautifully. I mentioned that temperature and humidity can impact the amount that you water this plant. And speaking of temperature and humidity, this is not a cold or frost tolerant plant, but it does well in a variety of indoor household temperatures and humidity levels. Higher humidity levels will help to have the plant grow faster and bigger, more beautiful foliage. But it isn't super necessary for a lot of pothos plants to grow well as houseplants. So one of the things that I definitely want to make sure we point out about this plant here is that I have chosen to grow my plant as a trailing plant. I love trailing plants. There's nothing wrong with growing this plant as a trailing plant, but what you will eventually notice is even if you give the plant ample light, the leaves at the bottom will start to grow a little bit smaller. The leaves will never mature and start to fenestrate. They will never develop those cool looking splits in them like you've probably seen with Monstera plants. They will just start looking a little tangly on the ends, which is the reason why I prune and propagate this one often. So it doesn't start looking super scraggly on the ends and it stays nice and full and bushy. If you want your Cebu Blue to mature and to develop those big, gorgeous, heavily fenestrated leaves like you've probably seen online, you need to give it something to climb. So you need to train it up a moss pole, something like that, and then keep the moss pole nice and moist, encourage the growth with a lot of warmth and humidity and plenty of bright indirect light. And soon as the plant climbs up the moss pole, continue adhering it to the moss pole as it climbs to help it out. It will start to split its leaves. And I'm going to show you a couple pictures of what this will look like if that's the look you're going for. I have toyed with the idea of taking a couple propagations from this one and trying it out myself. I just haven't really gotten around to it. And every time I clip this, I just pop the cuttings in water and then usually just like give them away to someone. So I haven't had the chance to plant any to try to train it up a pole yet. So since I did mention pruning off some of the leggy growth on the bottom and I mentioned propagation, let's talk about that next. As a pothos plant, this one is super easy to propagate, even though it's not the most common variety of the plant. Cebu Blue is very, very easy to propagate. I don't like to complicate things with this one. Typically, I just take a cutting and pop it into a glass of water. And then after a couple weeks, depending on the time of year, once it grows sufficiently long roots, couple inches long, I will transplant it into soil. Keep the soil lightly moist for a couple of weeks while the roots adjust to their new home. And then once I start seeing signs of new growth, I will back off and treat the plant as normal. So I will show you in a close-up shot where I take a cutting from one of these plants when I do want to propagate it. I find the best time to propagate is when I do have like this weird leggy growth that I want to prune off anyway, because you can trim that off and then easily root a bunch of tiny little cuttings and then plant them all together in a pot that are all like each single leaf cuttings with a node and roots. And then that will grow a nice bushy plant. So I just finished using that same concept with this. This is not a Cebu Blue, but it's the exact same concept. I planted a bunch of maybe some of them 2-leaf cuttings that I had rooted in water together in one pot. These were all from like a really leggy plant, but planted together, they look nice and healthy and bushy and they will grow a lovely new plant. So same concept for this one. And here is this little cluster propagation vase I have. This is amazing for rooting like a bunch of little 1 to 2 leaf cuttings so that once they sprout roots, you can plant them together, because while they're rooting, they also look really cool. And so this is a round that I just put in. I will do a close-up shot to show you some of the roots because some of them are already sprouting some really nice roots in here. Some of them I would probably plant now, but since it's winter and the roots aren't that long, I will probably just let these ride for like another month or so and see how they do. And then when I plant them, I will probably put them on some sort of heat mat, to encourage root development, since it is the middle of winter here and not the best time to propagate, but I do it anyway. In terms of pet safety for this one, if you have pets, this is a plant that you don't want to let them ingest. It is flagged by the ASPCA as having some mild GI issues if cats or other pets or dogs or kids or whatever do ingest your plants. It is meant for ornamental use and not for consumption, so I would recommend either putting it in a glass greenhouse cabinet or up and away if you don't want your pets to eat it. Mine is pretty much almost trailing down to the ground right now. I have it hanging from the ceiling usually. My cats don't bother it. They're old and lazy by now, so it's not really an issue for me, but definitely something to keep in mind if you do have pets that are very interested in your plants. Look, it's so long and lovely. It's like a little blanket. Love it. All right, everyone, so that about covers it for my Cebu Blue Pothos video. And like I said, it's very easy. There's really not that much to say about care for it. This one has gone through some serious periods of neglect, and you can see how long and lush it still is. Remember, pruning is key to fighting off that scraggly growth. Bright indirect light, water when the top several inches of soil are dry, and make sure to use a well-draining soil. If you're interested in checking out my care post on this on my blog, I will link that below. I also have a full post just about propagating this specific plant with lots of pictures, and it goes into some other methods you can do to propagate it other than just water, like using a sphagnum moss and perlite mixture, which I also have had a lot of success with. Otherwise, let me know if there's any questions you have about this plant, if you have one, what you love about it, if there's any other types of pothos that you would like to see me do a video on. It's one of my favorite types of plants, super beautiful, trailing, and easy to take care of. In the meantime, thanks for tuning in and happy planting.